The fire is already crackling softly in the background. You don't need to do anything now except relax, lie back, and let the quiet story take over. Welcome to Sleepless Scholar, where every evening we wander back through time, not for excitement or drama, but for something much gentler. Tonight's story is not about war or conquest. There are no kings to dethrone or empires to burn, just the slow unfolding of an ordinary day in the Middle Ages, a time when the world moved at the speed of a plough, and every sunrise meant more of the same. In a few moments, we'll step into that rhythm, but first, if you find these long, peaceful stories helpful for sleep or relaxation, I hope you'll consider giving the video a quiet thumbs up, or even subscribing to the channel. It helps more than you might think. And if you'd like to leave a comment down below, maybe tell us what time it is where you are, or how far into the video you usually fall asleep. I read everyone, and it's a comfort to see how many of us are here, drifting off together. Tonight, we'll begin before the first light of dawn, before the rooster crows, before the smoke rises. You'll hear the soft rustle of a wool blanket being pulled tighter against the cold. You'll feel the coarse straw beneath your back, and the presence of others snoring nearby, breathing warm air into a space just barely shielded from the wind. Together we'll walk through an ordinary medieval day, from the moment your eyes blink open in the early dark to the slow, smoky hours of nightfall when the fire burns low and voices become murmurs. No battles, no feasts, no castles under siege, just small tasks, familiar habits, the sound of wooden shoes on muddy ground, the quiet grind of wheat, the clink of a spoon in a clay bowl. You won't need to remember any names. You don't need to follow any plot. You can drift in and out, and everything will still be waiting when you return. This is a story with no urgency, just the slow turning of a world long past, imagined as clearly as a dream. Let's begin. Before the world was warm or bright, before even the birds dared stir in the trees, you were already awake. Not with a start, not from any loud sound or sudden alarm, but with a kind of slow awareness, the kind that seeps in before your eyes open, a faint ache in the shoulders from the day before, a familiar chill pressing in through the cracks of the wooden walls, the slight itch of straw poking through the thin layer of linen beneath you. The day hasn't begun, but the stillness tells you that it will. It always does. The room around you is dim, not dark exactly. There's just enough moonlight filtering through the slats to show shapes. But it's close. You can make out the rise and fall of others, still breathing steadily in the room. Your mother, your younger sister, maybe the neighbor's child, all curled under their own bundles of threadbare wool and patched fabric. You can hear someone shifting in their sleep, muttering softly, one leg kicking off a blanket. The air smells faintly of wood smoke from the hearth and something less pleasant, damp wool, sweat, maybe the stew that was left too close to the fire overnight. It's too cold to move right away, so you stay still for a moment longer, adjusting to the ache of waking up. Your back feels stiff, your feet are numb. You pull the fabric up a little tighter around your shoulders and let out a slow breath. The roof above you creaks as the wind shifts outside. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once and then is silent again. A single rooster offers a confused call far too early and no one answers. Eventually, you shift your legs over the side of the bedding and place your feet on the cold, packed earth below. There are no socks, no shoes. The ground is hard. The chill runs up your calves like water. You stand slowly. Everything in this room was reused and reused again. Wool spun from rough sheep, blankets stitched from scraps, the bed frame made from salvaged wood. But it holds. Everything here holds, because it must. You move toward the hearth. It's nothing more than a shallow pit lined with stone, but it's the center of the house, the place where warmth and food and light all come from. The fire has died to embers, but not completely. You stir the ash with a stick, then blow gently. The ember glows brighter. You add a few dry twigs, a little kindling, and soon a weak flame begins to dance. It crackles softly. The warmth is small but immediate. You hold your hands over it and feel the stiffness begin to fade from your fingers. Behind you, someone coughs. A soft voice mumbles. There's movement now. Not bustle, just the slow shuffling of others rising in their own time. You hear someone pulling on a tunic, someone else coughing into a cloth. The morning is beginning, not all at once, but piece by piece. You take up the water jug and step outside. The door sticks a little, and the cold air hits your face like a slap. It smells of smoke, earth, manure, and the distant dampness of the woods. The sky is still a deep grey, tinged with faint silver at the edges. The stars have begun to fade, but not entirely. You walk slowly towards the well, the grass crunching slightly beneath your feet. Your breath clouds in front of you. A neighbor's goat bleats softly from behind a crooked fence. You draw the water with care. The pulley creaks. The rope is damp. When the bucket rises, you lift it with both hands and carry it back inside, trying not to spill. It's heavier than you remember. It always is. Inside, others are awake now. A sibling stokes the fire. Your mother is already chopping something with a dull knife. Bits of onion and root vegetables go into the pot. The stew will simmer slowly all morning, thickening by midday. Someone pours a bit of yesterday's ale into a clay cup, not for drinking yet, but to take the edge off what's to come. A crust of bread is broken. Someone complains about how hard it's gotten overnight. There is no rush. There are no clocks, but the bells will ring from the church soon, and that will tell everyone what the time is. Until then, everything is measured by instinct. The birds, the wind, the heat of the fire, the sound of others rising, one by one, to begin again. You chew a bit of bread, sip water from a rough clay cup, and pull your cloak tighter. The day will be long, but for now, in this moment, quiet and cold and flickering, you are simply awake, and that is enough. Outside, the morning has begun to stretch itself across the village. The pale light presses over rooftops, soft and blue before it warms to gold. You can hear more movement now, footsteps in the dirt, the creak of a cartwheel, a door being unlatched with a wooden thud. The smell of smoke hangs low in the air, curling out of every chimney. You pull your cloak tighter against the chill and step outside again, this time not for water, but for the tasks waiting quietly by the door. The tools are always in the same place. A short-handled hoe, its blade worn thin, a wooden bucket stained and rough, a broom made from bundled twigs, now more handle than bristle. You take the hoe first. There are weeds to be pulled from the garden plot, even in the cold. The roots don't stop growing just because the mornings are bitter. The soil is stiff and dark beneath your feet, more mud than earth, and your boots sink slightly with every step. As you work, you hear others doing the same. A neighbor is already beating a rug outside their doorway. Down the lane, someone tosses slops to the pigs. and their snorts echo between buildings. A few chickens cluck uncertainly, stretching out their wings before beginning their hunt for bugs and bits. The village isn't large, maybe 20 homes in all, each shaped roughly the same, each with its own lean-to, stack of firewood, and pile of tasks that never really end. You move on to the animals. The goats need feeding. One of them bleats indignantly as you approach, stamping its hooves as if to remind you that it was awake long before you were. You run your hand along its back as you drop a handful of feed into the trough, the rough texture of its fur familiar beneath your fingers. Chickens scatter at your feet, pecking at anything they can find. One jumps and flutters, startled by a shadow, then they settle again. Back inside, someone is sweeping out the hearth. The ashes from last night are carried in a pan and dumped near the garden where they'll be used to improve the soil. Everything has a place. Everything has a purpose. Waste is a luxury no one here can afford. Breakfast is not a meal so much as a pause. A bit of porridge scraped from the bottom of the pot. A cup of thin ale. Maybe a piece of dried apple if someone remembered to save one. It's eaten in silence or quiet murmurs, not because anyone is upset, but because there's nothing urgent to say. Everyone knows what must be done. The work is the same as yesterday and will be the same again tomorrow. You chew slowly, grateful for the warmth more than the flavor. Once the bowls are set aside, the tools return to hands. Some go to the fields. Though it's still too early in the year for planting, there's always preparation. Others walk toward the forest edge, searching for kindling or mushrooms, or anything that might be traded or stored. A few stay near the village to mend fences, patch thatch, or help an elder neighbor carry water. The youngest children are kept nearby, handed scraps of cloth to play with, or small tasks to practice with pride. The mud thickens as the sun climbs. Your boots are heavy with it now, caked and cracking with each step. You scrape them off with a flat stick and keep going. A fence needs straightening. The gate is leaning. You wedge a rock beneath the post and tie a new cord through a hole where the hinge used to be. It won't hold forever, but it will hold today, and today is all that matters. The wind picks up. It smells of distant fields and the faint smoke of someone's early lunch fire. You pause and look down the path that leads out of the village. It's not often traveled. A wagon might pass through once every few days, bringing salt or fabric or strange news from towns you've never seen. But today it is empty, rutted and overgrown at the edges. A bird lands on the fence post beside you. Its feathers ruffle once, then smooth. It hops twice and watches you with a tilted head, curious and still. A church bell rings in the distance, and with it a subtle shift. It's not yet noon, but close enough to pause. Tools are set aside. You stretch your back slowly and brush mud from your hands. Somewhere, someone has already started preparing the midday meal. You can almost taste it. Simple broth, a bit of bread, maybe cheese if you're lucky. Your stomach tightens with expectation, but you don't hurry. There's time. There's always time. As you walk back towards the house, the morning behind you, you notice how the village has settled into its usual pattern. No shouting, no hurry, just the soft rhythm of survival. Everything moving in quiet circles, like the sun slowly arcing across the sky. You open the door. The warmth greets you. A bowl is passed into your hands. Steam rises. Another morning ends, and you eat without a word. You might not notice it at first, but the village has its own kind of music. Not the kind played by minstrels or sung in halls, but something more ordinary, layered, looping, and alive. It begins in the early morning and carries on through the day, shifting subtly with each hour. It's not loud, but it's always there, and once you hear it, you can't unhear it. There's the clatter of wooden doors opening and closing, always just a little off-kilter on their hinges. The bark of a dog chasing a shadow it doesn't understand. The low rumble of a cartwheel pulling through the mud, straining under the weight of firewood or stones or empty barrels. A rooster calls once more, later than usual. Its voice is strained now, competing with the shuffle of feet on packed dirt paths and the first clang of metal on metal from the smithy near the edge of the square. Children run past, their laughter rising and falling like birds taking flight. It comes in bursts, sudden, wild and bright, then vanishes just as quickly into a hush as they duck behind a wall or dart into someone's doorway. Someone yells after them, not in anger but habit, and the name echoes into the air, half swallowed by the wind. A goat lets out a long, almost human-sounding bleat. Chickens murmur to themselves as they peck at the earth, clucking softly, occasionally flapping their wings in lazy protest. A cow lowing in the distance adds a slow, rhythmic note, steady as breath. Somewhere behind a house, a woman sings, not to anyone in particular, just to herself. The tune is wordless, carried more by repetition than melody. You hear her chopping something, maybe wood or root vegetables. The dull thud of blade on block forming a beat beneath her voice. The blacksmith's hammer strikes again. Ting, ting, pause. Ting, ting, pause. The iron rings out and bounces off the walls of nearby buildings. Each blow marks time better than any clock. It's steady, practiced, without hurry. You can almost picture him through the smoke, sleeves rolled up, face streaked with soot, his arm rising and falling with the same tired rhythm he's known for decades. Above it all, the wind moves slowly through the trees beyond the village. It rattles the bare branches. It whistles slightly through cracks in the stonework. It nudges the hay thatch on rooftops, sometimes lifting it just enough to shift the shadows inside. Every so often, a crow calls from the church steeple, sharp and deliberate, a sound that always seems older than the rest. There are voices too. A woman greets a neighbor, her tone warm but reserved. An old man complains about his joints, or the weather, or the quality of the bread this week. Two boys argue about whose turn it is to collect firewood. No one listens closely. Everyone has their own noise to make. At the well, you hear the groan of rope against pulley as someone draws water. It splashes into a bucket below. The sound of dripping continues for a moment after, falling from the wood, the rope, the sides of the container. Footsteps retreat. The bucket knocks against the leg with each step. Slosh, knock, slosh, knock. In the market, such as it is, there's a low hum of exchange. Not shouting. No one here is trying to win a sale with volume, but quiet negotiations. A string of onions is weighed by hand. A length of wool is unspooled and examined with tired fingers. Coins, when they do trade hands, clink dully into leather pouches or calloused palms. Bartering happens more often. A pot for a basket, a comb for 2 candles. The value of things is felt more than calculated. Then silence, not true silence, but a lull, a moment between sounds. Someone has gone indoors, The smith has paused. Even the chickens seem to hold their breath. It's in that gap that you realize how full the day has been already. How much has passed without any rush at all. You find a place to sit near the edge of the square, a flat stone warmed slightly by the sun. You close your eyes just for a moment and listen. The rhythm continues. A broom sweeps, a baby cries and is quickly soothed. The dog barks again, this time at a passing bird. A door creaks open, then shut. The church bell rings once, and you feel it in your chest more than you hear it in your ears. This is the village's voice, not dramatic, not grand, but constant, and in its constancy there's a kind of peace. No matter how small the village, no matter how old the stones or how grey the sky, the sounds remain. They fill the space between thoughts. They carry the weight of the day. They are the song of survival, repeated endlessly, forgotten the moment they're gone, and yet somehow remembered by everyone. By the time the sun begins to climb overhead, the weight of the day has already begun to settle into the bones. The morning's tasks are mostly done or paused, the heavy lifting behind you, the more tedious work saved for later. There's a lull in the pace, not quite rest, but something close to it, a softness in the air, as if even the clouds have slowed down to float more gently overhead. It's not just the hour, it's the feeling that the world, for a little while, has loosened its grip. The smell of something warm and stewing drifts across the village paths, blending with the smoke of peat fires and the grassy tang of animals resting under shade. Meals at midday are simple. They aren't feasts, but they're earned. A bit of bread, a piece of dried meat, broth thick with root vegetables and last year's barley, maybe cheese if it's been a good week, maybe greens if someone's been out foraging and found something tender. The food is often ladled from a single pot and passed around in bowls made of wood or clay, chipped at the rim but clean and familiar. You sit on a low stool or a smooth log just outside the door, bowl in hand, steam rising slowly into your face. You eat slowly, not because you're being mindful, but because you're tired. The kind of tired that doesn't ache, just rests heavily across the shoulders. No one is talking much now, there's no need. The clink of spoons and the occasional shift of feet in the dirt is all the conversation anyone needs. A child nearby mutters a story to themselves between bites, not loud enough for anyone to listen, but no one stops them either. The warmth of the food spreads outward from the belly. It isn't filling in the way a feast would be, but it's enough. It softens the stomach and keeps the hands from trembling. It means the work will go on, and that's all anyone can really ask. When the bowl is empty, you scrape the last of it with a crust of bread, wiping the bottom clean before setting it aside. A dog waits patiently nearby, watching with tired eyes for any piece that might drop. After eating, there's no rush to get back to anything. You lean back against the wall of the house, or lie in the grass if the ground is dry. The sun filters through the thin clouds above, not hot enough to sting, just enough to warm your face. Someone is mending a bit of cloth nearby, sewing in long, uneven stitches that won't win any praise, but will hold it through another season. A man sharpens a blade, slowly, with deliberate passes of a worn stone. His motions are rhythmic, practiced. The rasp of metal on stone is almost meditative. You watch the clouds move. You trace shapes in them without really trying. A bird, a fish, maybe a dragon, if you let your mind wander far enough. Time doesn't press here. The minutes stretch wide between one bell and the next. You hear a bee pass close to your ear, a faint buzz, and then it's gone. A breeze stirs the tall grass. You shift slightly, then still again. Further off, a group of field hands has gathered at the edge of the barley rows. They sit in a small cluster, sharing a jug between them. One has pulled off their boots and is rubbing their calves, slowly, wincing a little but not enough to stop. Another hums a tune, low and soft, without words. They don't speak much either. They just sit side by side, eyes half lidded against the sun. This hour is not about productivity. It's not about checking boxes or measuring progress. It's about breathing, about letting the body remember that it is not only for labor, about letting the mind drift sideways into nothing, if only for a few quiet minutes. You don't think of the winter yet, or the next planting, or the chores waiting by the barn. You let yourself rest, not completely, but enough to remember what stillness feels like. The bell rings again in the distance, just once, a soft call, not a demand, just a reminder. You stretch, not because you want to move, but because you know you must. The jug is passed around one last time. The blade is tucked away. The stitching is folded. One by one, people rise again, slower than before, but with no complaint. A few mutter to themselves, swatting at flies, brushing dust from their sleeves. You rise too. You take one last look at the sky, now whiter and brighter than before. The clouds are thinning. The breeze has turned. The work calls again, as it always does. But something about the break lingers. A looseness in your limbs, a calm in your chest. And as you step back onto the path, toward the fields, the animals, the tools, you carry that silence with you, tucked somewhere deep beneath the rhythm of the next task. The land doesn't wait for you. It never has. It just sits there, quiet, sprawling, indifferent, and yet it demands everything. Your sweat, your time, your patience, and day after day you give it all, not because you expect gratitude from the earth, but because there's no other way. The fields are your rhythm, your duty, your inheritance, and as the midday quiet fades, the weight of the work returns, not harshly, but inevitably, like the shifting of a heavy cloak across your shoulders. You begin in the outer field, where the soil is darker, a little looser after last week's rain. The fence here leans inward slightly, kept up by effort more than design. You test it with a palm, feel the give of old wood, and keep walking. The path has been walked so many times that even the weeds don't bother growing in it anymore. It curves just enough to avoid the low patch where water gathers in spring, then opens out into rows, some straight, some crooked, all marked by hand. You carry your hoe or your rake, or maybe just your hands. The tools are what they are, simple, heavy, occasionally splintered. They do their job, and so do you. You begin to turn the earth, breaking clumps, pulling weeds that refuse to die, flattening mounds. The soil gives off a deep, warm scent, part rot, part growth, part memory. There's something grounding about it, as if the land itself remembers you, and you it. The sun is higher now. It isn't harsh, but it presses down steadily. Sweat forms behind your neck, beneath your arms. Not enough to soak your tunic, but enough to make the fabric cling. You pause to wipe your forehead with your sleeve, then keep going. There's no real rush, but also no break until the row is done. That's the rule. That's the rhythm. Sometimes, while you work, your mind drifts, Not far, not in great philosophical loops, but just enough to take the edge off the repetition. You hum a tune your mother used to sing. You imagine what tonight's meal might be, or whether the chickens will lay again this week. You wonder if the weather will hold, if the mule will need new shoes, if the moon will be full. Thoughts flicker like birds across the edge of your vision, here and gone. Around you, others are working too. A cousin dragging a sack of stones from one corner to another, an older man pruning back overgrown brush along the fence line, a pair of teenagers pretending not to race each other as they carry buckets to and from the stream. You nod to them when paths cross, but no one says much. The land doesn't require chatter. You spot a worm in the soil and leave it alone. That's good luck. The birds think so too. One swoops down behind you, snatches something from the dirt, and flutters off in a rush of feathers. You watch it disappear into the trees, then return to your task. The rows aren't going to clear themselves. After a time, you shift to the pasture, where the grass grows thick and uneven. It needs cutting, and you have your scythe balanced awkwardly over your shoulder. The blade is long, curved like a crescent moon, and sharper than it looks. You've used it so many times that your hands fall into the rhythm without thinking. Step, sweep, lift. Step, sweep, lift. The grass falls in neat waves, the scent rising all around you. Green, sweet, a little wild. It's quiet work, but satisfying. You can see what you've done, the cleared strip behind you, the untouched tangle ahead. Each pass of the blade pulls a bit more of the world into order. It won't last. Growth never stops. But for now, this is your shape to make. Once you've filled a few armfuls, you gather the cuttings into bundles, tying them roughly with twine or whatever rope is handy. These will dry in the sun, then feed the goats through the winter. The simplicity of the cycle comforts you. Work, wait, harvest, store. It isn't fast, but it's reliable. And in a world where little can be controlled, that's enough. By now, your back aches faintly. Not sharply, just a dull reminder that your body is older than it used to be, and the land doesn't care. You pause to stretch, letting your arms rise toward the sky, your eyes closing for just a moment. A breeze brushes against your cheek. You let out a breath and open them again. You finish the last row and gather your things. The tools are heavier now than when you began, though nothing about them has changed. It's just the weariness, wrapping itself around your limbs like vines. Still, the work is done for now. You walk slowly back toward the house, toward the sound of a boiling pot and the crackle of kindling catching fire. Behind you, the field lies quiet, waiting for the next day, the next task, the next hand to pass over it. And as you glance back once more, you realize the land doesn't feel indifferent after all. It isn't cruel, it isn't kind, it's just present, just waiting, and somehow that feels like enough. Far from the fields and muddy paths of the village, behind thick stone walls and iron-bound gates, the rhythm of a noble's day unfolds at a different pace, but not without its own quiet burdens. Life inside a manor house or castle isn't a life of ease and opulence that songs might suggest. It's slower, more structured, bound tightly by duties, expectations, and rituals passed down through generations. The clothing is finer, the food richer, but the hours are still long, and the obligations, though different, are constant. The noble wakes early, though not quite with the sun. Heavy curtains dim the light in their chamber, filtering the morning into soft greys. The air is chill against the stone walls, and a servant has already laid out garments for the day: linen underclothes, woolen tunic, embroidered surcoat. Each layer is carefully placed, warmed if possible, scented faintly with herbs from the manor garden. The noble is dressed not by choice, but by order. To dress simply would be to signal weakness. To dress too extravagantly might spark quiet gossip. There is a balance to strike, even in cloth. A tray is brought, bread with honey, perhaps a boiled egg, and a ceramic cup of warm ale or spiced wine. The noble eats slowly, sometimes alone, sometimes with a younger sibling or visiting cousin. Words are few at breakfast, but not absent. A steward may appear with a list of tenants needing decisions. A letter from a neighboring estate may require response. The day has already begun to assemble itself around them. By mid-morning, the noble steps into the hall. Light pours through narrow windows, dust swirling in golden shafts above the long wooden table. A retainer bows and murmurs something about horses, or accounts, or repairs to the gatehouse. The noble listens, nods, speaks with measured tone. There is always something in need of approval, and while a noble's word carries weight, it must be given carefully. Authority without thought leads to mistakes, and mistakes invite criticism from both peers and rivals alike. On certain days, the noble presides over disputes between villagers: a chicken stolen, a boundary stone moved, a marriage contract contested. The people bow deeply, speak quickly, and look down. The noble listens, or at least appears to, then renders judgment. It may seem trivial, but each decision is a stone in the foundation of order. To rule fairly is not just a virtue, it is a strategy. Afterward, there might be letters to write, slow, looping script on parchment, sealed with wax, trade agreements, invitations, requests for support. Writing takes time, and the words are often dictated to a clerk who repeats them back for confirmation. Paper is precious, ink stains fingers for days. By midday, the manor quiets slightly. The noble may take a walk through the gardens, flanked by a lady or a tutor, commenting on the roses, nodding at the progress of the herbs. Or perhaps they retreat to a private chamber to read, if they are literate, or to be read to. The topics range from scripture to histories to poetry, depending on taste. The words drift through the air like incense, soft and slow, spoken just above a whisper. When the weather allows, training follows. Even nobles must be ready. In the courtyard, the clang of swords echoes off stone. A sparring session begins, wooden blades for practice, real ones for show. A young noble swings too wide and is corrected with a nod. Sweat beads at the brow, and the weight of chainmail is heavier than expected. There is grunting, laughter, a bruise or two. No blood, not today. For those not given to swordplay, the hours might be spent at embroidery, or weaving, or music. Hands move deftly over needle and thread, forming patterns more elegant than necessary. A harp is tuned, fingers brushing lightly over the strings. The tune is familiar, an old ballad, soft enough not to disturb the doves on the windowsill. The music blends with the rustling of pages, the scratching of quills, the occasional bark of a hound outside. As evening approaches, a meal is prepared. It is larger than the peasant's midday bowl, but still far from a feast. Stew, bread, some dried fruit. On rare occasions, meat. The noble eats with family, sometimes joined by a traveling guest or a neighboring lord's messenger. The conversation is polite, measured. News is exchanged. Someone tells a half joke that earns a quiet smile. A servant refills cups without being asked. The room is lit by firelight and candle, and shadows flicker across the walls like distant ghosts. Later, the noble might write again, or simply sit, watching the flames curl upward. A dog lies beside the chair, breathing slowly. Outside, the wind moves through the trees, and somewhere in the darkness, an owl calls. The air is colder now. A cloak is pulled tighter. A hand rests gently on a book that won't be opened tonight. Eventually, the noble returns to their chamber. The bed is large, but the stone beneath is still cold. Blankets are pulled up to the chin, and the fire is left to die on its own. Eyes close. The world beyond the walls is forgotten. Tomorrow will come, with its decisions, letters, and quiet routines. But for now, in the hush of the manor, the noble sleeps like everyone else, tired, uncertain, and full of small, quiet thoughts no one else will ever hear. Life in the monastery moves differently, not by sun or season, but by bell. The day is shaped into hours, and the hours are named matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline. Each name a call, each ring a rhythm. The monks and nuns rise before dawn, sometimes when the sky is still velvet black, stepping silently into stone corridors, where the cold wraps around their ankles like a slow fog. There is no conversation, only footsteps and breath, soft as candlelight. The chapel is dark when they enter. A single flame flickers near the altar, casting long shadows across wooden benches and pale stone columns. The air smells of wax and dust and ancient wood. Robes swish gently as the clergy take their places. No one rushes, no one is late. In a place where time is counted by prayer, there is always enough. The voices begin, low, unified, steady. Latin verses chanted not for show, but for order, for obedience, for peace. The words rise, then fall, never sharp, never hurried. It is less like singing and more like breathing in unison. The prayer fills the space without breaking it. You don't have to believe to feel it. You only have to listen. After matins, the routine unwinds slowly. Some move toward the scriptorium, a long quiet room filled with desks and shelves, and a faint smell of parchment. Here, books are copied by hand, word after word, line after line. Illuminated letters curl into golden vines, ink drawn from crushed berries and soot. Quills scratch gently against the surface. A mistake means scraping the page, sometimes starting over. But the work is not rushed. The point is not speed. The point is preservation. Elsewhere, a monk tends the garden, not grand or ornamental, but practical. Rows of cabbage and leek, patches of mint and chamomile. The soil is turned with care. Herbs are gathered for medicine. A wooden pail carries water from a stone basin at the edge of the courtyard. Bees drift lazily between blossoms. A bird sings just beyond the wall, repeating the same phrase over and over, as if in prayer itself. In the kitchen, someone bakes. The bread is coarse, dark, round, kneaded by hand, marked with a cross, baked in ovens that glow red and hum low. The smell spreads down the halls, faint but grounding. Today's meal will be modest. Lentils, onion, perhaps fish if it's a day allowed. There is no meat, no indulgence, but there is warmth, and warmth is its own kind of blessing. Throughout the day, there are more prayers. Each hour calls them back to the chapel. The bell rings again, never loud, never sharp, but certain, and with it, the monks and nuns rise from whatever task they've been given and walk, slowly and silently back to the fold. Some carry tools, some carry scrolls, some carry only the weight of their thoughts, but they all return. The midday prayers are shorter, gentler. The light by now has spilled fully into the cloister, warming the stones, casting narrow beams that move like sundials along the walls. The silence is not empty, it is thoughtful, a silence full of presence, not absence. You feel it in your chest, like the quiet that follows a deep breath. Afterward, there is time for individual study. A monk might read from a leather-bound psalter, his lips moving silently. Another might polish brass candlesticks or repair sandals worn thin from years of pacing across the same flagstones. In the infirmary, someone tends to the sick, not with grand cures, but with poultices, prayer, and presence. A cool cloth, a murmured verse, a warm hand held over a cold one. Children from the nearby village may come to be taught their letters. They sit in rows on wooden benches, their voices hesitant as they repeat phrases they do not yet understand. A patient nun corrects them gently, guiding their fingers across rough parchment, teaching them the shape of thought, the sound of memory. In the evening, Vespers marks the closing of the day. The chapel glows now with more candles, their light golden and soft. The voices rise once again, deeper now, as if weighted by the hours just past. The final meal is taken in silence. A single reader stands near the wall, reciting passages from scripture or saints' lives. The others eat without speaking, letting the words fill the room instead of conversation. When Compline comes, the last prayer of the night, the sky has gone dark again. The stars hang in the cold air beyond the windows. The final chant is sung slower, quieter, as if lulling the stone itself to sleep. One by one, the lights are extinguished. Sandals whisper across the floors. Robes rustle like distant wind. Doors creak gently as they're closed. In the small cells, monks and nuns lie down not to dream, but to rest in silence. Their beds are simple, wood, straw, wool. Their rooms are bare, but they do not need more. They have their rhythm, their prayer, their peace. And in the stillness of the monastery, where time has no sharp edges, the world outside can fade. The bells will ring again soon, but not yet. Now there is only quiet. The village doesn't always hum at the same pace. There are days when its quiet rhythm swells, just slightly, when the air carries a different kind of energy, not loud exactly, but expectant. These are market days. They don't happen every day. Sometimes only once a week, sometimes less, depending on the size of the village and the condition of the roads. But when they come, people rise earlier, fires are lit faster, paths are swept, goods are packed with care. Even the animals seem to sense the shift, noses twitching, hooves shifting, eyes watching the lane. The first to arrive are often not from the village itself. They come in carts or on foot, wrapped in cloaks to keep off the early morning mist. Some bring cloth, woven and dyed in colors the villagers rarely see. Others bring barrels of salted fish, the smell announcing their arrival long before the wheels hit the square. There are sellers of candles, pots, combs, pins, herbs and tools, each with their own space, each unfolding their goods onto worn wooden tables, or even just blankets spread across the dirt. You walk toward the market slowly, not because you're hesitant, but because it feels like something to be savored. The sound reaches you first. It's a soft clamor, voices overlapping, a cart creaking as it turns, chickens squawking, as they're exchanged for silver or grain. Someone laughs, bravely and sincerely, the sound cutting through the hum like a warm knife through butter. The smells follow: sharp vinegar from a barrel of pickled vegetables, the sweet syrup of boiled honey cakes, the sour, salty air from a cheese wheel left too close to the sun. They blend strangely, but not unpleasantly. The market square isn't grand, just a widened section of the village road where foot traffic converges, framed by a handful of stalls and crooked signposts. But today it feels important. Today it's where the world seems to pause and gather itself. You pass by the fabric merchant first. She smiles with missing teeth and pulls open a fold of crimson cloth, so vibrant it looks out of place here, like a spilled drop of wine on a wooden table. You touch it with 2 fingers, rougher than it looks, but still fine. You don't need it. You don't even have anything to trade for it. But she doesn't mind. She nods and folds it again. Further on, a man is selling soap, thick, uneven blocks, smelling of tallow and lavender. He says nothing, just gestures with his hands, pointing to the stack, then to a small slate sign with a chalk mark. You nod politely, then continue. You see others from the village doing the same. A neighbor holding up a ladle made of horn, testing the weight. A child clutching a lump of wax like treasure. A pair of elders arguing quietly over the price of turnips, though both of them will likely buy the same amount regardless. Then come the traveling merchants, the ones who stay only for the morning. One sells trinkets, carved figurines, small glass beads, pins shaped like animals or flowers. They glitter in the light, catching the eyes of children and dreamers. Another offers stories more than goods, news from another village, a distant town, even the city. He tells of a festival 3 days' ride away, of a priest who claims to have seen a comet, of a knight who fell from his horse while chasing a stag. None of it matters. All of it matters. There is bartering, always. Coin is rare here and precious. More often it's trade. A skein of wool for a pot, a basket of eggs for a comb, a loaf of bread for a jar of honey. Each transaction carries its own quiet negotiation, measured not only in fairness, but in trust. A good deal is one where both sides smile, even slightly. As the day lengthens, the square grows warmer, shadows shorten, the sun bleaches the colors, makes everything look dustier, older. People begin to drift back to their homes, arms full of parcels, wrapped in cloth or tied with string. A girl carries a new wooden spoon. A boy chews a bit of dried apple, sticky-faced and content. The cheese seller repacks his goods. The fabric merchant folds the same cloths again, each with care. You take one last loop, not looking for anything in particular, just walking slowly, letting the sounds and smells settle around you like a blanket. There's no urgency, no final call. The market simply fades, people leaving in 2s and 3s, stalls emptying like cups after a long drink. And when you return home, your feet dusted, your hands a little rougher, you find the village just as it was, quiet, steady, unchanged in all the ways that matter. But something lingers, the echo of a song played on a lute, the glint of a bead, the smell of spice you can't quite name. Market day has ended, but it will return, just as it always has, and you will be ready. Not everyone in the village fits neatly into the world of field and flock. Some make their lives in the quieter corners, filling roles that don't involve crops or livestock, but are no less essential. Their names may be forgotten faster, their work less praised, but they are stitched tightly into the daily fabric, each thread holding its own place, and among them perhaps none is more known or more overlooked than the town crier. He's not what you'd expect, not grand, not commanding, just a man with a bell and a voice, both weathered by years of wind and repetition. He walks with a slight limp, though no one remembers how he got it. Some say from a fall on market day, others from a tavern fight in his youth. It doesn't matter anymore. He moves at his own pace, slower than the bells he rings. When he comes, people glance up, pause what they're doing, but don't always stop. His bell rings once, twice, then a long silence before his voice follows. It's loud but not harsh, measured but never hurried. He reads from a parchment, if there is one, edicts from a distant lord, church announcements, news of taxes, or sometimes nothing more than the name of a merchant who set up shop just outside the village with salted meats or cheap boots. He delivers each word as though it were sacred, even when it's mundane. A wedding ban, a funeral notice, the time of a distant eclipse. After the announcement, he continues on, turning down a side lane, his footsteps soft, his bell silent again until the next corner. He's more background than figure now, part of the scenery. Children follow him sometimes, imitating his voice, giggling when he catches them and mutters something under his breath. He pretends to be annoyed, but he never shoos them away. And then there are others, odd jobs, strange roles, quiet necessities. The rat catcher, for one, not glamorous, not pleasant. He carries traps in a sack, sets them behind barns and near grain stores. You rarely see him, but you know where he's been. The faint smell of ash and old fur, the bits of bait left behind, the whisper of metals snapping shut when the day is done. He gets paid in bread, in eggs, in favors, and he never seems to smile. The gong farmer comes at night. You don't talk about him, but you hear the wheels of his cart, the slosh of the barrel. He empties the cesspits behind the houses, one by one, dragging a heavy scoop and wearing a long cloak that stinks even when the wind is in your favor. He does what no one else wants to, and because of that, you nod respectfully if you pass him on the road. You don't hold his gaze, but you acknowledge it. That's the unspoken agreement. Then there's the tinker who isn't always there. He passes through once a month, maybe less, a small man with a crooked back and a pack that clinks and jingles as he walks. He fixes pots, sharpens blades, repairs buckles and latches. His hands are stained black with soot and polish, and his smile is full of small teeth, too many for his mouth. He whistles while he works, a tune with no beginning or end. You don't know where he sleeps or where he goes when he leaves. But when something breaks, you wait for him, because he always returns. The ale taster is a more cheerful figure, chosen by the Lord or sometimes by custom. He visits each alewife's brew once a week. He takes a sip, closes his eyes dramatically and nods, or frowns, or grimaces, depending on the batch. It's mostly ceremony, but no one argues with his judgment. If he says the beer is good, the villagers drink more freely. If he says it's turned, the barrel is dumped and apologies made. He likes his work and it shows. There are others too. The thatcher's apprentice, who climbs roofs with sure feet and scratched hands. The candlemaker's daughter, who smells always of tallow and rosewater. The boy who carries messages between farms, paid in slices of apple and promises of new boots. the weaver with her spindle, the bone carver with his tiny blades, the washerwoman who sings to the clothes as if they were children in need of comfort. None of them are famous, none of them hold titles, but they keep the village whole. Their work is the kind that fades into the background, so quiet it's almost missed, until it isn't done. Then you notice, when the rats return, or the pots stay broken, or the air goes still because no one has called out the hour from the crossroads. You don't think about them every day, but when the bell rings, or the sharpened blade glints just right in your hand, or the stale air behind the house is gone, you remember, and maybe, just for a moment, you whisper a silent thanks, because without them, even the smallest village would unravel. You might not notice them at first. Children in the Middle Ages didn't live in a world made for them. There were no toys waiting in tidy corners, no books written in simple words just for their eyes. There were no classrooms lined with chalkboards or lessons wrapped in story and song. Childhood was not a pause before life began. It was life, only smaller, faster, and full of tasks that would, in time, become obligations. But still, they were there, darting between animals and tools, chasing one another down paths, worn thin by footsteps much older than their own. They were small figures, with tangled hair and quick hands, often barefoot, always watching. A child might be 5, maybe 6, and already responsible for carrying water, for gathering eggs, for minding the smallest of the goats or the loudest of the hens. They knew which herbs to pick and which to leave alone. They knew how to soothe a baby, how to stir a pot, how to listen closely when adults spoke in low voices just out of earshot. And yet, despite the chores and the rules and the weight of expectation, children found ways to play. They always do. You'd hear it in laughter carried on the wind, bright and sudden, bursting like the crack of a lock in the hearth. You'd see it in the way they darted behind corners, hiding in plain sight, giggling at the thrill of being unnoticed. A bit of rope became a horse, a patch of mud became a bakery. Bones left from a roast were stacked and balanced into towers. Sticks became swords, dolls, animals, or instruments depending on the day or the hour. There were games that needed nothing at all. One called questions and answers, one told riddles in a circle, one was simply a challenge to run across the pasture without falling. Stones were gathered and thrown at targets. Bits of cloth became costumes. Chickens were chased, not caught, just startled. And geese were avoided entirely. Their sharp beaks and louder tempers feared more than the village dog. The children played between chores, or sometimes during them. They hummed while gathering wood. They whispered jokes while herding sheep. They told stories, handed down from older siblings or borrowed from overheard conversations, making them grander with each retelling. A tale about a knight became a story about a dragon, which became a story about a dog who turned into a king. Accuracy wasn't the point, wonder was. Some of the play was darker, shaped by the world around them. A child might pretend to hold court, sitting on an overturned bucket and passing judgment on their friends. Others mimicked the church, ringing imaginary bells and chanting half-remembered Latin. Some played at battles they'd never seen, reenacting the stories told by travelers with sticks and shouting. These games had rules only they understood, and they shifted with the players' moods. In the evenings, when the sun dipped low and the air turned cooler, you'd see them gathered near the fire or clustered on the floor, their hands busy with simple tasks, twisting yarn, sorting beans, plucking feathers, but their minds still restless. They fidgeted, whispered, nudged one another. An older child might take the lead and start a quiet song, or try to retell a tale they half remembered. The others listened, sometimes correcting, sometimes laughing, sometimes simply leaning their heads on one another, eyes growing heavier with each verse. Not all children lived with their parents. Some had been sent to another house to work or train. A young boy might serve as a page, cleaning boots and holding horses. A girl might be learning to spin or weave under the stern watch of another woman. They were still children, but the village gave them new names: helper, servant, apprentice, and they answered to those before anything else. And yet, in stolen moments, when the tasks were done and the sky was the color of wet slate, even those children found time to play. A skipped stone across a stream, a secret stash of berries, a carved figure hidden in a pocket and taken out only when no one was looking. Children in the Middle Ages didn't have much, but they had each other. They had dirt paths and low fences and endless imagination. They had songs with no clear origin and games with no clear end. They had scraped knees and sunburned cheeks and hands stained with berries and soot. And through it all, they had the ability to see more in a patch of grass or a piece of twine than most adults could see in an entire field. Even in a world that asked so much of them, children still found ways to be children, and that alone made the world just a little softer. Evening settles like a blanket, slowly and without urgency. The sun slips behind the hills, not in a hurry, but in a long exhale, leaving behind a sky painted in layers of dusty rose, gold, and deepening blue. Shadows stretch across the village paths. The animals quiet themselves. A final cluck, a bleat, the shuffle of hooves, and then stillness. Inside the homes, fires are stirred to life once more. Embers from the midday warmth are coaxed with careful breath and dry twigs. Sparks catch, flames grow, pots are lifted back into place. The smell of broth thickening, of onions softening in fat, of stale bread warmed on a flat stone begins to rise and drift. It's not feast food, but it fills the space, curling into corners, clinging to the wood beams, announcing the end of the day. You sit close to the hearth, not because it's expected, but because the heat pulls you there. Your body, tired from the fields or the tools or the long walking paths, draws toward warmth like moss to moisture. The seat might be a stool, a bench, or just the floor, covered in a thin layer of rushes and straw. You hold the bowl in your hands, not ceramic perhaps, but carved wood, dark from years of use. It's chipped on one side, a small crack sealed with resin, but still strong. The stew is simple: turnips, cabbage, barley, maybe a bit of salt pork if there was some left over from market. It's hot, and that's what matters. You eat slowly, not because you're savoring each bite, but because chewing feels like the only thing you need to think about right now. Around you, others do the same. No one talks loudly. The conversation, if there is any, is soft, muted. A question about tomorrow's tasks, a comment on the wind shifting, a quiet blessing before the first bite. The fire crackles. A bit of wood collapses inward. A child shifts in their seat, feet dangling above the floor. Someone pours a small cup of ale, handing it over with a nod. You take a sip. It's warm, flat, a little sour, but it tastes of rest. After the meal, bowls are stacked, not washed, at least not yet, but set aside near the hearth, where they'll be scraped and scrubbed once the water's hot enough. For now, attention turns toward the fire. The flames flicker against the walls, casting long shadows that move like silent dancers. The light is soft, gold and red, wrapping around your shoulders like a cloak. Someone begins to hum, not a full song, just a fragment of a tune remembered from childhood or borrowed from a traveler's tale. The sound is low, more vibration than melody, but it settles the room. Another voice joins in, humming along, imperfectly but earnestly. You don't know the words, you don't need to. Someone tells a story, not a grand one, not tonight. Just a quiet tale of a neighbor who once tried to fence in a goose and ended up being chased across the yard. There's laughter, but it's tired, the kind that comes from relief more than joy. You laugh too, shoulders relaxing, eyes heavy. The fire pops again, and the dog at your feet lifts its head, then sets it back down. Its breathing is slow, even. The baby across the room is finally asleep, cheek pressed to a woolen shoulder, one tiny hand curled into a fist. Outside, the village is quiet. The only sounds are the last sighs of the wind and the gentle creak of roof timbers adjusting to the night air. The world is smaller now, tucked in, bound by the walls of your home and the warmth of your people. Someone rises to add another log. Sparks shoot upward, then settle. The flame steadies. The room glows a little brighter. You lean back against the wall. The warmth of the fire against your legs. The coolness of the stone behind your head. Your eyes drift toward the ceiling. The rafters above are dark with soot. Spiderwebs sway gently in the corners. It's nothing you haven't seen before, but tonight, in the flickering light, it feels safe, familiar, right. A few more words are exchanged. Someone wishes good night. Someone yawns and stretches, joints popping in the quiet. You don't move, not yet. The fire is still warm. The floor is still solid. The moment is still whole. Eventually, you'll lie down, on a mat or a straw mattress, or just a pile of blankets and furs, shared with others in the room. But for now, you're here. The day has ended. The work has been done. The food was warm. The fire is strong. The world, for a few hours more, is still. There's a stillness tonight in the village, but it isn't silent, not really. The quiet at the end of a medieval day is a soft, layered hush, filled with sounds so familiar, so constant, they cease to feel like noise at all. It begins with the fire, still glowing at the hearth, its flames tamed to a bed of red-orange coals. They shift and crackle quietly, like the whisper of fabric between fingers. You can hear the last pop as a log settles into ash, the gentle hiss of steam from a kettle not yet removed from its hook. Beds, if they can be called that, are claimed and arranged. A low mattress of straw, tucked into a wooden frame or laid directly on the floor. Some sleep alone, most do not. Families sleep together, sometimes on the same bedding, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, warmth shared like inheritance. Children curl against parents, dogs find space near feet. Blankets, thin or thick depending on the season, are shared, tugged, adjusted without words. The room creaks as bodies settle. Someone coughs, dry and lingering. Another sniffles, tugs the blanket higher and sighs. A board in the floor gives under shifting weight. A baby lets out a low whimper, quickly soothed by a hand reaching blindly in the dark. Breathing becomes the new rhythm, in and out, shallow and deep, layered and steady. Outside, the village is not asleep, only resting. An owl calls from the tree line, low and deliberate. A fox may cry out once in the distance, a sound that doesn't belong to anything human. Wind shifts through the thatch, pushing loose straws, testing the corners of the roof. Every now and then, the cold creeps in, and someone tucks their knees in tighter or rolls over, pressing their back to the fire's fading warmth. The scent of the day still lingers, smoke, wool, earth, and old wood. The faint sweetness of dried herbs hung from the beams. The sharper smell of boots kicked off in the corner. It's all part of the room now, woven into the walls, into the fabric of dreams. A whisper passes between two voices, a mother and child, a husband and wife, two siblings, remembering a joke from earlier in the day. The words are few, just enough to ease the mind, just enough to drift. There's no clock to tell you the hour, only the feel of the air against your face, the sense that the village has wrapped itself in a blanket and turned inward. And though the night is not silent, it is not loud either. The sounds that remain are soft, familiar, rooted in the earth and wood and breath of those who live within it. Fleas bite, not often, but enough to break the stillness. Someone scratches, swats, mutters. Then all is quiet again. You try not to think about them. You pull the blanket tighter and focus on the sounds that soothe. The dog's paws twitching in a dream, the rustle of someone adjusting their shirt, the distant clink of a pot cooling beside the hearth. Sleep does not come like a wave. It comes like mist. It rolls in slowly, brushing against you, curling around your limbs, settling without announcement. Thoughts fade not all at once, but piece by piece. A sentence becomes a word becomes a shape becomes nothing. And even in the moments between sleep and waking, the world continues gently. A mouse scurries across the beams above. A cat, half wild and barely tolerated, paws at the door before slipping inside and curling beside the dying fire. The last candle sputters and dims, leaving only the memory of light. If you open your eyes in the night, you won't see much, just the faint outlines of bodies, the glow of coals, the soft rise and fall of breathing. You'll hear the village in its slow exhale, alive in its rest. No shouts, no footsteps, no bells, just the hum of sleep shared by many. And if you lie still long enough, wrapped in your own warmth, you might forget the straw beneath you, the ache on your back, the chill on your toes. You might forget where you are at all. You might sink fully, deeply, quietly into the long, unbroken rhythm of night. In the village, time isn't measured in minutes or marked by clocks. It passes in seasons, each with its own scent, its own color, its own kind of labor. The people don't ask what day it is. They ask how long the frost will last, how soon the rains will come, how many more warm nights they'll get before the earth begins to harden again. The calendar isn't read from parchment, it's read from the sky, the soil, the weight of wool on your shoulders. Spring begins not with a trumpet, but with a thaw. The ground softens, the mud deepens. Water flows again in small rivulets between furrows and fence posts. Snow melt seeps down into the roots, and tiny green shoots peek above the ground like cautious eyes. You wake to birdsong again, tentative at first, then insistent. Tools that sat unused by the hearth all winter are pulled out, sharpened, cleaned with stiff brushes and worn cloth. It's the season of sowing, of preparing, of bending and digging and planting. with cold fingers and hopeful minds. You spend your mornings ankle deep in wet earth. Seeds are pressed gently into furrows, covered by hand, marked by stones. Children run barefoot again, their toes cold and pink in the morning mist. Laundry returns to lines, fluttering like flags between homes. Smoke rises from chimneys, a little less often. Meals get lighter. There is a return to movement, and with it, a kind of cautious joy. Then comes summer. The sun climbs higher, the days stretch long, and the work becomes heavier. Weeds grow faster than you can pull them. The barley ripens in the fields, the cabbages swell. The sheep are sheared in one long, sticky day, filled with braying and laughter, and tufts of wool clinging to every surface. The heat presses down on everything. You drink more, sweat more, sleep less. The nights are shorter, but full of soft sounds. Crickets, frogs, the distant barking of a dog left to patrol the edge of a pasture. You rise before the sun to beat the heat. Meals are quick and tasks are many. The fields must be checked daily, fences mended, roofs patched before the late summer storms roll through. There's no rest in summer, but there's satisfaction. You can see the fruit of your effort growing. The world feels full, busy, alive. Autumn arrives almost unnoticed, until one morning you step outside and the air smells different. Not cold, not yet, but sharper. Leaves begin to turn, at first just a few, then all at once, setting the trees ablaze with orange, yellow and red. The harvest begins. It is frantic and purposeful. Every hand is needed. You pick, pluck, cut, gather, sort. You fill baskets and bags and barrels. The barns swell. The cellars fill. Fires are lit earlier now, and the meals begin to thicken again. Soups, stews, heavy bread with honey and root vegetables. You dry herbs in bundles. You salt meat. You seal jars with wax. Each act is a kind of insurance against the cold to come. And when the work is done, when the last apple has been gathered, the final sheaf bundled and stacked, you exhale. The village grows quieter again, not still, not yet, but waiting. And then winter. It comes with wind first, then frost, then the kind of snow that muffles everything. Footsteps, voices, even thought. The fields are bare, the trees black against the white sky. You spend more time indoors, near the fire, your breath visible in the air until the flames grow strong. The animals are quieter now, their movements slower. You patch clothes, you mend tools, you tell stories in the dark. The days are short, the sun rises late and leaves early. Food is stored carefully, counted with quiet precision. A few apples remain in the cellar, soft but sweet. The salted meat is rationed, bread is stretched. You eat with gratitude, even if hunger lingers. But winter is not all hardship. It is also rest. You sleep longer, you sit more, you think. Conversations grow deeper. Games return, dice, riddles, songs played softly on whatever instrument has survived the seasons. You reflect, you listen, you wait. And then one morning, the drip of water outside tells you the freeze is lifting. A bird calls, the trees sway a little more freely, and the world begins again. The seasons don't ask permission, they don't arrive on time, they don't apologize when they're harsh or linger when they're kind, but they return, always, predictable in their unpredictability, demanding, generous, silent. And through it all the village adapts, not just surviving, but flowing with it. Year after year, cycle after cycle, a life made of rhythms so deep, so slow, they become the background hum of existence. The end of the day comes not as a moment, but as a slow surrender. It begins with the lengthening of shadows, the way light stretches just a little longer across a field or a wall. The golden edges of the world soften. The sun dips behind the distant hills, turning the sky into layers. Dusty lavender above the rooftops, a band of rust and ember along the horizon, and then the quiet grey that signals something has passed. In the village, nightfall arrives without announcement. No bells ring. No one declares that the day is done. It simply becomes clear, through the softening of voices, the lowering of heads, the way people begin to move a little more slowly. A cart makes its final pass. Someone calls a child home with a voice that sounds more like a question than a command. Chickens are ushered into their coops with soft clucks of protest. A goat bleats one last time before settling. Fires are lit if they weren't already burning. A few stray logs are added with a careful hand. Smoke curls upward, not in great clouds, but in thin ribbons, merging with the cooling air. Candles are placed on wooden tables, their small flames flickering in glass holders or resting in simple clay dishes. The light they give is not bright. It doesn't fill the room. It just glows enough to remind you where you are. You might sit on a stool or crouch by the door, watching as the blue deepens into black. The village is quieter now, not silent but thoughtful. The louder moments are behind you. What remains are murmurs, the closing of shutters, the rustle of hay being laid out for animals too old or too beloved to sleep outside. The dog finds its place by the door, nose tucked under paw. Above, the stars begin to show, not all at once, but in slow revelation. One here, another there, soon a handful, and then more, until the sky is freckled with them. There are no lanterns bright enough to block their light, no chimneys high enough to hide them. They hang over the village like tiny promises, silent and distant and endlessly patient. You feel the coolness now. It creeps beneath the edge of your sleeves, brushes your cheeks, settles into your bones. It isn't unwelcome, it simply is. You pull your cloak tighter or wrap a shawl over your shoulders. You shift closer to the fire, where the warmth is steady, where the wood pops gently as it settles into ash. From the neighbor's house you hear a lullaby. It's not sung loudly, just a hum really, with a few soft words layered into the tune. A child responds with a sigh, a shifting of blankets, a thumb suck, then silence again. In another home, a spoon scrapes the bottom of a bowl. A door is latched, a floorboard creaks. All of it part of the same rhythm, the slow exhale of nightfall. The older ones talk a little longer, their voices low and steady. They speak of weather, of animals, of the aches that seem sharper now than they did last season. They don't seek answers. They speak just to share the quiet. The younger ones fight sleep, eyelids fluttering, heads bobbing with each nod. They'll be carried soon, or nudged gently toward bed. And then, bit by bit, the light fades, not just outside, but within. The candles are snuffed, the fire dims to a soft red glow. The room darkens, not in fear, but in peace. The dark is familiar. It wraps around the room like a familiar song. You lie back, you breathe slower, you listen. There's no reason to speak now. The words have all been said. What's left is rest, not the kind you force, but the kind that rises naturally, like mist over a field, the kind that closes your eyes before you realize you've stopped watching the flames. Outside, the wind stirs the grass, A shutter knocks once, then is still. Somewhere, an animal shifts in its stall. Somewhere else, a star falls so quietly you would never know unless you happen to be looking. But your eyes are closed now, and the village sleeps. It begins with a scent, earthy, clean and cold, the kind of smell that arrives just before the first drop lands. You notice it even indoors, wafting through the narrow gap in the shutter or slipping under the threshold. It settles into the air with a kind of stillness, a pause before motion, a breath drawn and held, and then, almost imperceptibly, the rain begins. The first few drops fall like whispers. You might think it's just the creak of the wood or the shifting of the wind until you hear it again, soft, rhythmic, spaced apart like footsteps from a dream. Then more follow, faster, closer together, until the thatched roof above you comes alive with sound. It isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. The thatch catches the rain and softens it, turns what might have been a clatter into something like a lullaby. 1,000 droplets fall, but none of them shout. They arrive in waves, pattering gently against the straw, each one absorbed into the thickness of the roof. The sound is uneven but comforting, like a heartbeat, steady but with small surprises tucked between the beats. Inside, you pull your blanket higher, not for warmth necessarily, but for closeness. The rain makes everything feel tucked in, wrapped up, distant from whatever tasks were left undone. You listen. You don't have to try. The sound invites you, draws you deeper into the night. The fire has died down to red coals. It doesn't crackle anymore, just breathes softly in the hearth. The room is dark, shaped only by the outline of a few low shadows. The bucket near the door, the curve of a chair, the rise and fall of someone sleeping nearby. Their breath is slow, yours joins it. The rain picks up, not fiercely, but fully. It becomes a presence, a living texture above you, washing the world, brushing against the roof in tiny fingers. You imagine it dripping down the eaves, collecting in puddles at the corners of the yard. The earth outside, thirsty from days of sun, now drinking in silence. Sometimes there's a shift in rhythm. A gust of wind pushes the rain sideways, making it rattle faintly against the shutters. Then it calms again, resuming its soft percussion. The village doesn't stir. The dogs stay curled beneath benches. The hens huddle in their nests. The sheep press together in their shelter, heads low and still. If you listen closely, you can hear the slight change in pitch as the drops strike different parts of the thatch. Near the edges, it's a duller thud where the straw is thickest. Near the peak of the roof, a brighter, sharper note. Together they form a pattern, subtle, shifting, never repeating. Someone turns over nearby, mutters a name from a dream, then falls silent again. You don't open your eyes. There's no need. The rain is a blanket you can't see but feel nonetheless. It cradles the house. It fills the silence without interrupting it. It hums. You wonder where it came from. A storm on the coast, perhaps, or clouds that gathered quietly above the forest, too slow to notice until they were upon you. But the thought fades. It doesn't matter. The rain is here now, and everything else has fallen away. You remember hearing this sound as a child, hiding under thick wool blankets, feet curled close to your chest, the same rhythm above your head. Back then, it made you feel safe, not because the world was perfect, but because the roof held, the walls stood, and the rain could come and go without touching you. Even now, that feeling remains. The thatch, laid by hand, reed upon reed, layered carefully by someone who may be long gone, it still holds. It bends but doesn't break. It shelters without asking to be noticed. You think of the fields outside, slick and dark, their furrows filled with water, glistening beneath the grey sky. You think of the road turning to mud, of the tools resting under cover, of the barrels catching drops beside the barn, the whole village resting, letting the rain do what it does best. There's a peace in knowing the work is done, at least for tonight, that nothing needs tending, nothing needs fixing, that outside the rain can fall, and inside you are warm, dry, still. The sound begins to soften, the drops come slower now, the pattern less dense, as if the sky too is growing tired. One last rustle, one final sigh, a single drop, long and slow, falling from the edge of the eaves. Then quiet again, not silence, but rest. The rain has slowed now, but it hasn't stopped entirely. A few scattered drops still find their way down through the leaves, landing with the softest of taps on the ground, on rooftops, on whatever surface offers a gentle welcome. The thatch above your head holds strong, its soaked reeds swollen together, now a thick living shield between you and the sky. But even in that protection, you feel the presence of the outside, cool, dim, and endless. It's quiet inside, and your body has stopped aching, not because the aches are gone, but because you're no longer paying attention to them. Your limbs feel farther away, dulled by warmth and exhaustion. The day's work sits behind you like a shadow at dusk, present but no longer sharp. You don't need to think about how many steps you took, how many buckets carried, how many weeds pulled. The tally fades. What remains is the rhythm it left behind. You lie still and your mind begins to wander, not with urgency but with curiosity. In this half place between waking and dreaming, thoughts become softer, looser. They untie themselves from facts and float gently into images, into colors, into something more like feeling than language. You remember a path, narrow, muddy, winding along the edge of a pasture you haven't seen in years. You're walking it again now, barefoot, the grass tickling your ankles. There's someone beside you. You don't turn to look. You don't need to. You know who it is, even if you've forgotten their name in the waking world. You hear their laugh. It sounds like wind chimes, or the creak of a wooden door on a sunny afternoon. Your thoughts drift again. You see a loaf of bread steaming in the cold morning air. You remember the smell, yeast and ash and flour, mingled with the faint tang of smoke. You don't know if it's memory or invention, but it doesn't matter. In this space, real and imagined share the same weight. A face appears, weathered, familiar. They smile at you without speaking. You feel the kindness in their eyes, the warmth of their presence. Perhaps they were a friend. Perhaps they were someone you once wished had been. The difference doesn't matter now. You're not remembering. They're simply here, with you. The fire pops quietly, grounding you once more. It's the anchor in the drifting tide of your thoughts. You feel its warmth on your cheek, not hot, but constant. You shift slightly beneath the blanket. The weight of it presses gently down, like a hand on your shoulder, reminding you that you're safe, that there is no rush. The room around you breathes. The old wood settles. The roof releases another sigh. Someone across the room lets out a slow breath in their sleep. The rhythm is shared. You are alone in your thoughts, but not alone in the world. Your mind floats again, this time to something absurd. a goose in a crown sitting proudly on the village well. It honks in a voice like your uncle's. You laugh softly to yourself. The sound surprises you, but you don't question it. Dreams are beginning to trickle in now, disguised as idle thoughts. They blur and bend with the edges of the night. You see stars, not in the sky, but in your mind, shimmering shapes that dance like embers caught in a gust. They shift and form pictures, animals, towers, a spinning wheel. None of it makes sense, and all of it feels important. You're not trying to control them. You're just watching like a visitor to your own mind, content to observe without judgment. Somewhere outside, a tree creaks. The wind moves again. The last of the rain slips from a leaf and lands with a soft pat against the thatch. You exhale, slow and deep, feeling your body fall further into stillness. You don't notice your hands anymore. Your feet are heavy. Your breath is the only thing you're sure is still moving. There is a story unfolding behind your eyes now. You're part of it, but also not. You're walking a path through a forest that glows with silver light. There are voices ahead, speaking in a language you almost understand. A door in the ground, a lantern that never goes out. These are not memories. These are beginnings of dreams. And still you remain half here, half there. Not quite awake, not quite asleep. The in-between, the veil, the softest part of the night. This is the place where fears do not follow, where the weight of the world grows lighter with each breath, where the sound of your own heart becomes a lullaby, steady and quiet. There is nothing else to do, nowhere else to go. You are being carried now, not by hands, but by the gentle pull of sleep. Its arms are made of warmth, of repetition, of old songs you've forgotten the words to. It carries you through memory, through fog, through the hush of night. The rain has stopped, the coals have dimmed, the house is still, and you, slowly, softly, are almost gone. There's a moment every night when the edge of sleep becomes more real than the room around you. It comes slowly, gently, so much so that you don't realize you've arrived until you're already drifting. The fire is nearly out now. What remains are faint pulses of warmth, red and orange, buried deep in the ash. They no longer flicker, they simply glow. Their light doesn't reach far. It rests quietly in the hearth, breathing with the coals. The walls of the house blur into shadow. The outlines you recognized earlier, the table, the stool, the stack of folded cloth, fade into the dark. You stop tracking the shapes. You stop wondering what time it is. The questions of the day no longer have answers because they no longer need them. Your limbs feel distant, weightless. You haven't moved in minutes, and you don't plan to. Around you, the house sleeps. Someone nearby shifts under a blanket. A sigh, deep and unhurried, escapes from the bundle beside the door. The dog twitches in its sleep, perhaps dreaming of a chase or of warm sun on its fur. A baby murmurs, then quiets just as quickly. All of it adds up to a hush that is not empty, but full of life resting, life paused, life surrendered to the gentle hush of night. Beyond the house, the village holds its breath. The rain from earlier has stopped. In its place, a silence hangs that is thick and velvet, the kind that feels like a room has been sealed in cotton. The sky above is deep and dark, the kind of dark you only see in places without lanterns, where the stars have space to speak. They whisper now, not in words, but in light, cool and flickering and slow. You let your eyes fall shut. There's no reason to keep them open. Everything that needs to be done has been done. The dishes will be cleaned tomorrow. The animals will be fed again. The roof still holds. The earth still turns. And now, all that's left is to rest. In the distance, you might hear an owl again. A low, steady call, haunting but not frightening. Just a note, like a punctuation mark on the day's final line. A soft gust of wind brushes the wall outside, rustling the thatch just enough to make it sound like someone breathing. Your thoughts grow slow, stretch thin across the landscape of dreams. A face you saw earlier reappears in your mind, not in sharp detail, but like a shadow drawn across the surface of water. A sound from a childhood game. A scent that reminds you of someone you haven't thought of in years. Your mind doesn't resist. It follows each thread for a moment, then lets it go. There are no deadlines in this space, no plans, no expectations. There is only softness, only the warmth that remains, only the steady rhythm of breath and the sound of stillness filling every gap. This is the last thing you hear before sleep. The slow settling of the house, the muted symphony of shared rest, the faint trace of wind moving beyond the walls. You hear your own heartbeat, soft and steady. You hear the whisper of the blanket as it rises with each breath. You hear nothing new, and that's the comfort of it. The world continues, but it does not call to you. It has given you permission to drift, and you accept. Sleep is not far now. It's already begun to wrap itself around your thoughts, around your breath, around your body. You don't fall, you float, downward, inward, into a place without shape or edge, into the quietest part of the night, and there gently you let go.